Hi everyone, welcome back to Heartland Mamas.
I'm Heidi Henry.
And I'm Murri Briel.
Talking to you from the edge of the Great Red Divide.
Today we're doing our part 2 of our human trafficking series that we did. If you didn't get a chance to catch the first part, we'll catch you up to speed. We basically ran through the types of trafficking, which include labor, sexual, forced marriage, and cyber, but that's another separate episode. We talked about it's a global epidemic. There is, it's going to require a lot of work together in order to get this done, how we have inadequate laws, inadequate ways of finding businesses that are involved in sex trafficking, and some of the stories about these people who've been trafficked, both labor trafficked as well as sex trafficking.
Yes.
So what we'd like to kind of hit on now is we're going to talk about Jeffrey Epstein, we're going to talk about Les Wexner, we're going to talk about the connections between girls missing, and see where we go from there, and then what we can do legislatively as we go forward.
Okay. You know, Murri, this is nothing new. This is something that has been out there since I was in high school. They used to say, be careful at the mall, you might get kidnapped and sold into trafficking, you know, and that was in the 70s.
Right. Yeah. Well, you're absolutely right. And unfortunately, that is, or fortunately, that is a much less percentage of those who are trafficked are random victims that are picked up off the street.
It doesn't happen anymore.
Well, it still does. Actually,
still...
in Joliet, just about 6 months ago, there have been a couple of times that there was one where girls were pulled over by an Illinois State police officer. Thumbs up to you. They were in the back of a car with a young man who looked like he was in his 20s. Something looked odd. The police officer pulled him over and separated the girls, said, "Girls, are you okay?" And they're like, "No, we're not okay. He wanted to meet us and he put us in a car and we don't know where we're going," and the officer saved him. There was another instance 4 months ago where at a Dollar General, they have the big mirrored things up on the sides. A woman came in with her child and they were going through the store, and you know, a little toddler is kind of this and that, and 2 men were following her. They had cornered her and one man was by the front entrance, and they were sort of corralling her in and through, and the guy stepped up and was like, "Oh no, this is my wife, and she's like, "No, it's not, what's going on?" She fought back and then didn't. And so those situations do happen. We want you to be aware of that. But predominantly it comes from a socioeconomic dependence. It comes from being in a bad place. LGBTQ adolescents are particularly vulnerable due to isolation and not having a sense of community. But also, you know, anytime there's a natural disaster,
yes,
the numbers go up exponentially. So
right. Anytime people are misplaced in a rapid fashion, separated from their familiar area and from their family, this happens. People quickly, young people especially, fall into jeopardy almost immediately. So.
Absolutely. And there are many cases coming out right now involving Epstein. In fact, one is pretty poignant. She's, I can't think of, her name, but she's done a couple of interviews and she talks about how she was a 14, 15-year-old girl.
Yes. And
how he said, "Come on, check it out," and she didn't know, and she went and just hanging out. And as the interview goes on, you see her talk about how, well, I guess, you know, if they're treating me really nice, then I guess it's just sort of expected. That's what I'm supposed to do. She luckily didn't go back after, but it was hard, she said, because, you know, they give you money and they give you things.
They would give her $300 every time he would molest her or be inappropriate in some way, shape, or form, and it caused her to drop out of school and a lifetime of heartache because she was so confused because she felt complicit.
Right.
You
can't be complicit at 14. You can't be complicit at 15. You can't. Hell, I'm sorry, I'm not even sure you could be complicit at 19 when or any age when there's a power imbalance.
You can't be complicit in your own rape. You can't. You cannot be complicit in your own sexual trafficking. Period.
So as we're talking about Epstein, let's talk about how just in the last 24 hours, there are now cases being called into the Attorney General in the state of New Mexico because of Epstein's ranch.
Right.
So they won't release the number of calls that they have had about people and instances that are coming forward and saying this happened. So there very well may be a case opening in New Mexico. And here's something that it goes into our laws, which are problematic. He didn't have to register as a sex offender in New Mexico.
Right.
Even though he owns property, he has a ranch, he's a sex offender, it is one of the few states that does not require any sex offender registration.
Right.
The reason he got out of registering in Florida was the plea he took was with a woman who was 17, so it wasn't a sex offender, even though he was able to sneak out there. So overall, we talk about issues with gun registration, etc. We have issues with sex offender registration.
Right.
We have issues with, our laws being uniform across the board. One of the big things that we're missing is we have very lax business registration laws in the United States.
Very lax business.
We have no federal
law. And the thing is that for most small businesses like mine, more regulation is more fees. I totally understand that. But there are going to be some businesses like massage parlors, like spas, that are going to have to adhere to some type of federal regulation in order to contain the issue of sex trafficking.
Hospitality industry,
yes,
is very, and that's for labor trafficking. Remember, there's two different types,
right?
But there are definitely requirements, I believe, that should be in place, because as we talked about last time, there is each municipality, state has their own registration requirements, so
right.
There's no uniformity. And there's no way of tracking down these people who own the massage parlors, who are the funders of the massage parlors.
Right.
So they're hidden behind the corporate veil.
The corporate veil keeps them safe, and it keeps those profits flowing. I was reading an interesting thing about how banks are being the front line in shutting down a lot of these sex trafficking rings, because they'll come into the bank with huge sums of cash and want to transfer it out of the country. And that sends up all kinds of warning flags. Now, we used to not have that, but several of the larger banks have come up, even some of the small credit unions have come up with a system where if there's a large cash transaction, either into a deposit or funneled out of the account, because they use these funnel accounts to help hide it, and then they go into like a cash wire transfer overseas. And a lot of times it goes back to when the trafficked victims are from out of the country, it goes back to their country of origin, where they came from, so that you know that it's a global issue. There's somebody on that side working the angle, as well as here in the United States, trying to have a comprehensive global law or a set of standards for this is going to be very difficult.
It's going to involve all different branches working together. It's
right.
going to involve the financial industry working next to the to the regulations, employment regulations, to the judicial system. Okay, so when we're talking about judicial system,
right.
Here's something that just completely blew my mind. So
this is terrible.
Governor Greg Abbott,
and we're going to put Governor Greg Abbott
on a timeout.
You, sir, are getting a timeout from the Heartland Mamas.
Yeah, I say he's getting a grounding.
Oh, I think he should stand in the corner.
Okay, well, stand in the corner too.
Yeah.
So there's a bill that was proposed down in Texas. It's HB 1771. And the representative who introduced it, Sean Theory, worked very closely with the governor's office. It was to help reduce the number of children that are trafficked. It was also that the bill was designed to not uncriminalize prostitution for children. So I know that sounds what? Yeah. So if I'm 12 years old and I am caught having sex with a grown man, I am liable criminally. So it doesn't go juvenile. They don't get. They can be prosecuted, and the law is ridiculous. So the governor said, well, we can't change this law because then it wouldn't allow our prosecutors and our judicial system to separate the traffickers from the victims. I'm sorry, but everyone under the age of 17 is a victim. They're not, they didn't consciously make this decision to make this life choice.
Governor
So a 14-year-old girl is caught in a compromising situation, is prosecuted for.
Governor Abbott, you don't prosecute victims. I don't know how this is not news to you or why this would be news to you. You should understand that victims don't get to be prosecuted.
Victims should not be prosecuted.
No, right. I used bad grammar there. But instead, victims should receive services and help to get out of the situation they're in.
So that's just it. Okay, so the law, this new law that Representative Theory put forth, was this new legislation said that police could still separate them, apprehend them, nothing changed. The only difference was that anyone under the age of 17 would go either to a family member back home or to a protective services or some sort of rehabilitation, some sort of program to help them.
Right.
And his final justification for turning this down is because if we let kids off from being prosecuted as sex workers, then traffickers will use more kids because they won't get prosecuted.
I don't know
how that makes any
sense.
At
all.
Don't. We could do an entire series on stupid laws.
Right.
And stupid justifications for laws.
Right.
Greg Abbott, really? You think that traffickers are going to use more kids because kids don't go to jail? The hell is wrong with you?
Yeah.
Grounded.
And you have to understand, Murri, a lot of those children that he's referring to are kids that are in the foster care system. They're kids that are at risk for whatever home situation they're in, a dysfunctioning home. And these are kids that are just trafficked right into these terrible situations and further exacerbating the pain that they're already in. We're going to prosecute them.
Right. And they would, of course, get much harsher penalties than the Johns that did it.
Right.
So we've got some other states that are just messed up. We've got states that now have instituted a sex shoppers list. So anyone who has been, it's not a sex offender list.
They used to call it the John list.
It is. It's a John list. So they think that, Florida thinks that by keeping better track of the names of the guys who are going to the sex workers will slow down and stop trafficking, which I'm not sure how that logic is supposed to work either.
It used to be that the biggest threat they could give you was to put you in the police blotter, and then you'd be held up for public ridicule.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And now it's like people are like,
so what?
So what? You know? So...
Another big trend is to increase penalties for traffickers, which there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But increasing the amount of penalty you get for a crime is not necessarily a deterrent, because those people are already going to commit the crime anyway.
Right.
They're making so much money. Billions and billions of dollars are flowing back and forth. Easy money with no real traceable way of being tracked down. Of course they're going to take the risk no matter how many penalties you put in place.
Well, it's after drug trafficking, it is the second most lucrative thing to do for a criminal. And the fact that there's a ready market, you know, I always wondered after 9/11 when we realized we went to war in Afghanistan, and a lot of the rebels were funded by heroin profits, right?
Yeah.
And why people would still do heroin? Because it's addictive, and apparently we have the same issue with this. Is it's very addictive to be in that power position, taking advantage of a trafficked person.
Great, yeah.
Yeah.
And we can go. There's further-reaching implications to all of these laws that are being passed, and what really needs to happen is we need to figure out the best way to do this and work together as a country, both locally and federally, and then work together with other nations, because this is a global epidemic. It's a global problem.
And we talked a little bit in our last show, Murri, about how a lot of this goes through these exotic spas, okay? And the fact that we have medical spas and therapeutic spas legitimately, I've got a massage therapist I go to see, and she has to have a poster on her
about
wall
trafficking.
About trafficking. Well, we need to be able to differentiate so that we're not impeding the business model for those that are in a therapeutic or medicinal spa setting, and make sure that we don't combine the two and confuse the issue, because that's what happens, is it confuses the issue and makes it more difficult to separate out sex trafficking from legitimate medical need.
So here's something funny. We've got this huge problem of trafficking, right? We have missing children, and we don't know where 1,488 children are as of last month. Those are the children that we gave away to foster parents, to sponsors, to get them to be, and we have no record. There's been no action, no motion. So you could have very easily given those kids away to traffickers.
Right.
You could have given them away to anyone, and we may never know how we're going to get them back.
We had more paperwork to fill out when we adopted a puppy.
Yeah, pretty much.
And it just boggles my mind that they can't tell us where these kids are.
And that's because there's no communication there wasn't between the different departments.
Well,
but here's something awesome. Okay, so there is an organization within the federal government who is responsible for, or who does a large majority of the work on sex trafficking. So or trafficking in general in the Department of Labor. It's a separate organization. And our friend, Mr. Acosta, who is no longer the former Secretary of Labor, slashed the funding for that program, or attempted to slash the funding for this year by 80%. So they went from having...
Wait, Murri, do you think he could have some skin in this game?
Maybe. Well, I mean, what's the difference between Bethany Christian Services and Betsy DeVos? Bethany Christian Services takes children that cannot be found. So what they do is they have to put a notification out in a newspaper twice in order to reunite these children. It's kind of a part of the process.
And it can be any newspaper. It can be... Yeah, it can be the Ottawa paper, and they're working in Fort Worth, Texas.
They have to put notifications out, and then they put the children into a foster system, hopefully being able to find the reunification. So, but what's interesting is young children particularly get to go to a contract with Bethany Christian Services, which is made millions for DeVos and her family, which also is very racially motivated, which is against LGBTQ couples adopting. Right. So they have no business being in connection with the government, but they are. But here's the thing. 80%. 80%. Love one of our representatives who, when he came before, she said, okay, so I see you've got this big comprehensive plan. However, you had $86 million in the budget last year for the organization that does all of the work on trafficking, and this year you're giving them, not all of it, but the largest percentage, and giving them $18.4 million. How are you justifying all this work that you're doing? Where's it coming from? Right. And he couldn't. So again, we have all these layers on top of layers, and whether Acosta had anything to do with anything or not, even though he's tied to Epstein and the whole 9 yards, the point is he's protecting those people like Epstein. He is enabling those wealthy financiers, the business people, the who are utilizing the sex trafficking, who are utilizing the trafficking services. We're not saying that he's actually trafficking children, but by enabling laws and reducing regulations and making things easier for sex traffickers to work.
When you remove the protections and the safety nets, you are just as guilty. You are just as guilty because you have to do your damn job, which is to protect people. And when you remove that safety net and kids fall through, it's a disgusting, immoral place to be.
So where we are right now, we have children who are missing. We have migrant children who are separated from their families. We have migrants coming over that are taken. We have an influx being taken, being trafficked throughout our country and out. And we have no federal guidelines for helping to fix this
Murri,
problem.
I have told you, there is no one in this current administration that's capable or compassionate enough to do this.
I have to
Everybody has got their hand in the cookie jar, and whatever they pull out money-wise, they're hanging on to because that's what they're in it for. And we have to put, we always say we got to put people before profit. Not until January 2021 are we going to have the opportunity to fix this unless we keep calling our congressmen and women and demanding a change. These are human lives, and I don't care if their skin is brown or if they're from Guatemala or if they're from Brazil or if they are from Africa or Asia or wherever they're from. These are human beings that walk the planet with us, and we do them a gross disservice by not doing everything we can do to protect them.
Absolutely.
So we keep hiring more grifters, more people who want to make a profit.
And speaking of grifters, we go back to our friend Mr. Epstein and the sweetheart deal he was given. And our friend Ben Jarofsky made a good point. It had to have come from somewhere higher up.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if it came from the president level, but it clearly came from influential donors, from campaigns. It came from corporations. It came from big money somehow, somewhere. And then we tie in Epstein with Les Wexner.
Right.
So I keep hearing this name, and he's the he's the president of L Brands, which is Victoria's Secret, Abercrombie, Bed Bath and Body Works,
think of your
Hollister,
Abercrombie models.
Right. And they kept focusing on that, but here's the interesting thing. So this guy is worth $6.6 billion. He's extraordinarily wealthy.
Yep.
He's been pretty successful. And the Epstein connection comes in because he had worked for him, but he rose through the ranks. He was actually his financial advisor, and he was the trustee for the Wexner Foundation.
Yeah.
So they're drawing the parallel that a lot of Epstein's money came from Wexner, came from the control that he had of those assets.
Right.
We're not insinuating Wexner had anything to do with this, but Epstein utilized that or used that vehicle, and we don't know for sure about.
Well, we're going to find that
this is going to be so deep.
Yeah, that this has got not just legs, but it's got wings. It's flying from country to country. It's going from one person to the next so rapidly that it's going to be one hell of a mess, one hell of a network by the time we get to the bottom of it. Bottom line, money does not excuse this poor behavior, but money has paved the way to allow people to suffer, children to suffer irreparably. And we have to be aware that no matter who this implicates and where it goes, that we have to be willing to stand up and keep these people accountable no matter how much money they have, no matter what their position in government or society is, that we have to rise up and be better and greater than that.
Absolutely.
So, but there's a couple of things that I wanted to go over too, is that we have a couple of things that we need to do to change how we regulate this issue or how we legislate on this issue. Right now we're working with a law that was passed in 2000 and it just keeps getting reaffirmed. Yep. We add a little bit to it, but we don't really address the problem, and we've not had the will in this country or the reasoning or the desire to make it any better for anyone else. We have just kind of glossed over it and moved on. And there are individual organizations and people that have worked really hard on this. But moreover, we need to make sure that we have a comprehensive trafficking bill that goes through the Congress, that is seen in the Senate. Mitch McConnell, I'm looking at you. And gets to the
He's
president.
not actually here. That would be really creepy.
Yeah.
He's still leering at the people in the detention
I'm telling you, the optics for that.
Side note, you know what happened. The first one was set up, staged, ready to go.
Yes.
They thought they could go to a second one. Apparently someone in the White House, someone in the propaganda arm, maybe Joseph Goebbels, dropped the ball, and they went to an actual detention facility which showed what actually goes on. The best is the toothpaste. Did you see that
No.
I posted? So there's a picture of a guard, a female guard, and you see that it's a commissary, and you see the fruit, and this was for the children.
Right.
So you see the snacks that they have lined up, and then you see this whole side of additional things. And on one box is written in Sharpie, toothpaste.
Yep.
Just like the homeless signs. And if you look at the box and you go in closer, they're packets of soy sauce with the word toothpaste written on the outside. Yeah, this administration is so clumsy and clunky that I find it ridiculous to believe. It makes sense that they completely biffed this
I told you, there's
photo
nobody
op.
competent or compassionate enough
And
to do
Pence
anything.
comes out and says they're treated really well, and then he goes and sees that. And the thing that's startling is not one person, they've mentioned this many times on social media and in the news, is that not one of them interacted with any of those
It was
detainees.
like when I was running for Senate, Murri, and I would go through the parades and I'd shake everybody's hand because I am genuinely happy to meet
She really
everybody.
is.
I really am. I love to meet people and I love to hear their stories. And I would always take so much time that I would get separated from my float. So I was running to catch up to my float.
Always, you're always running to keep up with everybody.
But Senator Resin's people would come up behind me, and we have a very startling video and picture of her standing in the middle of the street just kind of doing the princess wave. She never touches anyone. It's just bizarre, because if anything, that human contact, that person to person, look somebody in the eye, is so important. But she also removes herself from touch, from human interaction. And
Well, that makes sense with the way she votes on policy.
well, okay, so point given. But I think when you remove yourself from human contact, from touching somebody, from relating to them, from looking them in the eye and discussing who they are, and there's obviously a language barrier.
They had an interpreter.
It's still a language barrier. You're not connecting.
Getting the actual...
So,
Right.
But when you are a public servant and you lose that person-to-person touch, you have no place in politics anymore.
Well, it's the same thing in corporations. The higher you go up in the corporate ladder, the less you remember what it was to be the lower rung.
Right.
The less you remember what it is to be the Amazon worker hustling back and forth in the warehouse.
I'm picturing Chevy Chase. Remember in Christmas Vacation?
Oh, yes!
His boss was like, can't remember his name. Anyway, and what he said to him as he walked by. Because apparently he'd made something that was making the company very, very wealthy and very famous. And the boss didn't care and didn't give a crap.
Exactly. So the higher up they go, then again, you go into the corporations where they're beholden to their stockholders. They're beholden to their bottom line. Their job is to make a profit. The more profit they make, the farther they get removed from the people that are actually helping to make them the profit. And the policies they decide to implement go farther away. So Heidi's 100% right.
So in watching Lindsey Graham's body language, him crossing his arms and leaning back.
Lindsey fainting couch Graham?
Yeah. And I thought, this man is so disconnected from these people who are, apparently the one place that they weren't supposed to go that they went into was the land of the great unwashed. So nobody had a shower, and they're chanting shower, shower, shower. And there's some video that got out about that.
I still can't believe they put the word toothpaste, because that's where all commissaries keep their toothpaste is with all the rest of the food products, because that makes total sense. Like, all right.
I'm telling you, they're not able. My friend Bonnie Jean Kessler, if you're listening, Bonnie, this is for you, used to tell me people are either unwilling or unable to help others. And that was when we had the great discussion on bringing pads to Ottawa, Illinois in 1990. And you said, Heidi, sometimes people are unwilling or unable to not be homeless, to not be there. And I said, but we're struggling against the people of the city that don't want the homeless shelter. And she goes, and some people are unwilling or unable to help others. You have to be aware of that. And that's what I saw when I saw the optics. I thought those are people who are unwilling and therefore unable to help or deal with this situation.
And I'm sorry, I question the record keeping that we have of the people who are being detained. I question,
yes.
We're detaining them, but what's the process?
There is no process.
We're 200 over here, maybe 300, maybe 150. I'm sorry, but I should know how many beds I have and how many bodies I have, and I should have their names and information. So if that's the case, where are a lot of these people going? Is there a chance that they could be put into a labored traffic situation?
Absolutely.
Or the women and girls a sexually trafficked situation? Because there's no record keeping.
No, we've already lost over 1,400 children. God only knows what's happened to those kids. And God willing, they're okay wherever they are. I know some have been coerced into being adopted out and have no opportunity to get back with their
Speaking
parents.
of coercing our poor immigrant girls, and the last thing on this, which ties in with trafficking. So apparently we are, apparently the government paid a pro-birth propaganda specialist to track teen girls' menstrual cycles.
That's just not invasive at all.
They can't keep track of humans, but apparently we have funding to keep track of teenage girl menstrual cycles.
To make sure.
This guy is known for coercing women to having children,
yes,
and then giving those children up for adoption. Right. Surprisingly enough, this guy's worked with the Bethany Christian Services, which happens to be the DeVos. So if you think that that's not a part of trafficking...
Betsy, I have 8 yachts, DeVos. Betsy, I have 8 yachts, DeVos. Is making money on this.
On a side note, I got to tell you, I really thought that she was probably the worst thing that could have happened in the Trump administration when the cabinet first came out.
We underestimated
I was devastated. I was like, this is going to set back so much education, so much. And wow, now she's like cream of the crop. As far as the slime patrol goes.
Couple things float to the top.
Depends on how much protein you have.
As we say on the farm.
It depends on how much protein's in there. All right. So anyway, folks, thank you for listening in. Thank you for listening to how we followed the money, how corporations and traffickers utilize the non-existent laws that we have, the need for federal laws. We really need comprehensive federal laws in this case.
We need to make sure that we fully and properly fund DCFS and its workers to make sure that children in foster care and in abuse and neglectful situations at home are properly cared for and aren't being trafficked.
We need it globally. In our own country, we need to make sure that people aren't disadvantaged to the point where that's the only option they have, or where they get sucked in and suck others in, like the girl in Florida who was Epstein's masseuse for 3 years, who got trapped and pulled other people in. So it's about economics, it's about social, it's about compassion and empathy and understanding we're all people, And it's a multi-level problem, but we have to do something because it's not getting any better.
No, it's not. It's not getting any better. And God help us if we don't do something. Something. We have to motivate this administration to take firm action on trafficking. I know. If wishes were horses. The thing is that it's all we got, people. We have to work within
I say revolution, not anarchy. That's the word we should have used on Friday. Revolution. So we will talk about revolution at some point in the future, not anarchy, as Heidi likes to call it. And considering I'm the center of the two of us lefties, and I'm way on the left of her, so that should be a fun show to do.
I think I'm way left of you.
She is, and I'm on this issue further. But thanks for tuning in, guys. If you'd like us, please share us on social media. You can find us at Heartland Mamas, MAMAS. Put us in Google. We pop up everywhere. Subscribe on YouTube. Please share with your friends on YouTube. And do the same for us on our podcast.
And we've got some fun stuff coming up for Wednesday's podcast, a little lighter topic. So can't wait to release that one, and we'll talk some more. And
if you have suggestions, you guys would like to have us come out, we're happy to come out and do an event for you, a picnic, potluck, whatever you decide to do.
We missed a picnic today.
She had to bring it up.
I did. I'm so sorry. I am busy.
Deepest apologies, Lacey County Democrats, that I was unable to attend your picnic.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I have summer camp, horsemanship summer camp this week.
So we will make it up to you and come out and do something else for Lacey County.
We will.
All right, well, thanks a lot, guys. Please like, subscribe, and if you really like us, donate.
Yeah.
Until next time.
Take care now.
Bye-bye.